I still remember that day as if it was yesterday. It was July 10th, 2020. When I walked in there and they asked me for my key and my badge, and they started asking me questions. And at the end of it, they're like, well, you need to have a drug screen. And I'm like, no problem. I'm in my mind, I'm like, this is not an issue because I haven't taken an alprazolam in like 3 or 4 days. And, you know, I'm the smartest guy in the room, right? I'm the pharmacist. I should know that alprazolam it's in your body for like 21 days.
Yeah, you probably know the half-life, you know what it decomposes into during that.
Didn't care.
Explain that to me.
Didn't even think about it. Didn't even think about it.
Was it arrogance? Was it why didn't you care?
I didn't care about that because I didn't think I was going to get caught.
I got Jesus in my mind. In this world I live behind. Thought I'm on my way.
Yeah, why don't you just tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Darrin, and I'm a recovering alcoholic and drug addict, also a child of God, mid-50s, been sober now 2+ years. I am a pharmacist, currently not working in the practice of pharmacy because of what I have done in my past. My license is currently restricted in the state of Wisconsin. I have to abide by their stipulations to hopefully get my license back clean and clear after being in their program for about 5 years. One of the stipulations is if I want to be a practicing pharmacist, I have to have a supervising pharmacist that's working alongside of me. And if you've been into a pharmacy in the most recent past, particularly after the pandemic started, you'll see that most of the time there's only one pharmacist that's working. And so it would be quite difficult to find a position where I would have a supervising pharmacist along with me to be able to actually do the job, so to speak. And then you start off slowly getting your what they call pharmacist in charge hours up to where you could actually be all by yourself. Once again, part of the stipulations of my program, as well as I need to see a counselor. I also can get drug tested any day of the week for the next 5 years. Wow. And that's just part of the stipulations to try to get my license back.
Are there other stipulations that are part of that program?
I mean, other than I have to write quarterly reports, I have to attend a minimum number of AA meetings or Christian recovery meetings or 12-step meetings per week that are regulated by the Board of Pharmacy. They control how many times I get tested per year. They control how many times I need to see my counselor per year, per month, per quarter, whatever it may be. They, in essence, control a lot of aspects of my life, and rightly so. I mean, if we really sit and think about it, having a license to practice pharmacy is entrusted by you and the state that you work in, that you are going to abide by certain rules and regulations. I broke that trust, and there are consequences. And I fully accept those consequences and need to move forward with those consequences to hopefully, again, get my license back complete and clear. Because right now I have a quote unquote ding on my license that anyone can really see if you go to the right place. In the regulations, or I should say on their website, because again, having a license to practice a profession is not a private matter, it's a public matter.
Yeah, therapists are like that too. You go to the board website, and if there's any complaint or any investigation, you're supposed to tell them too if you've had any police contact, if you've had a DUI.
Yep.
And so all of those things would be public. Well, some of those things would be public anyway, but they would be on the board as well. Yeah. So it's interesting. You're at a place now where you've just said, yeah, rightly so. And you kind of understand the logic behind it. Was that always the case?
Oh, no. I mean, let's be honest, where I came from a very dark place. I've always had trouble with alcohol as long as I can remember. I mean, I grew up in a normal middle class family, myself and my sister, my mother and father, both who are still married. I was a very much of a rule follower. I went to Catholic grade school until I was in 7th grade, moved over to public middle school, but I was like a quote unquote goody two shoes. I mean, I followed the rules. I did what I was supposed to do. And until I got to be a senior in high school, between my senior year in high school and going to college was really my first foray into alcohol. It's me and a couple buddies in a back road, drinking, I want to say peppermint schnapps. I'm not even sure. Can't even remember. Didn't really think much about it till I got to college. And then when I got to college, I realized that, hey, if I have a couple, I feel pretty good and I can let a lot of my guard down and be a part of what others are. But I always never would. It was very rare that I have one or two. It was always to excess.
Was that rule following and that being a goody two shoes, was that something that was promoted by your family? Or was that something that you put on yourself? Or
I don't know. I mean, I don't really remember that, to be honest. It was just felt it was the right thing to do, I guess. I don't know. I mean, my parents were pretty strict, but not that strict. Not that I can remember. I mean, not like I had a really good childhood that I can remember. I really did. I mean, we moved to Neenah, Wisconsin, which is a small town about 40 minutes south of Green Bay. Their claim to fame is they make manhole covers. If you look at manhole covers, you'll see Neenah Foundry on them. They're all over the world. It's kind of funny, actually.
Yeah, I'm just picturing like the town, the parade has manhole covers in it. The cheerleaders are wearing manhole covers, and
it's also the birthplace of Kleenex. It was Kimberly Clark was huge there. And my father was an aircraft mechanic, and my mother she managed like a hair salon, and she was an LPN for a while that I can remember. She worked on a drug and alcohol unit, as I recall. My parents they're really good people. My sister and we didn't get along the best, but it wasn't terrible. She always resented me a little bit because I played a lot of soccer, and when I was on a traveling soccer team, and my parents did and sacrificed a lot so we could go do that. Yeah, I had a really good childhood. I grew up, like I was telling you, I grew up as a Catholic. I was an altar boy, went to mass every weekend. My parents took us, my sister and I. We were good Catholics. So
how about drugs and alcohol? Was that present in your life or in your family, in your community?
No drugs. Alcohol, I would say, it's hard for me as an alcoholic now to say that I would say my dad was a heavy drinker. I can't really tell people you're an alcoholic. That's for yourself. That's for you to decide. That's one thing I've learned in recovery is like, I can't tell others what they are, what they aren't. Heck, I have a hard time identifying what I am. So, but my dad would drink, probably after I got out of college, more so that I can recall and remember. My mom didn't drink very much. Yeah, I mean, alcohol was there. Northeast Wisconsin, if you're familiar with it, is
I've heard
I
there's
mean,
no
it's
drinking there.
oh
It's pretty much a
it's,
dry town.
no,
No one has anything to drink ever.
Ah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's commonly, you know, Appleton, Green Bay, Milwaukee, Madison, Wisconsin in general is considered to be the drunkest state in the union.
Hmm.
We're professionals here. Some people have said, Lewis Black, a comedian, has said that we are professionals in the state of Wisconsin. I embrace that. I really did.
Uh-huh.
To my detriment at this point, but yeah, it was part of society for sure here.
So walk me through that. I mean, there's definitely a lot of drinking in the larger Wisconsin, the state of Wisconsin. Wasn't a huge part of your growing up. So, how did the progression start for you then?
I would say it was in college. I mean, when I was a freshman in college, I learned what alcohol was. It was the first time that I had really, I was out on my own, freedom, that kind of thing. Alcohol was very prevalent in my undergrad years at University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. We had house parties inside the dorms. This is just when I turned 18. When I turned 17, they moved the drinking age from 18 to I think 19. When I turned almost 18, they moved it to 21. And so I was in that area where people, like my roommate, for example, was a year older than me, but was always legal and I wasn't. And so alcohol was just free flowing because people were like, well, this is crazy. Why are we even doing this? Especially in the state of Wisconsin. But we drank a lot. My freshman year, I drank a lot. But I drank a lot on the weekends and at night, but it wasn't like it took over my life. I then moved over to University of Wisconsin-Madison, where I got my degree in pharmacy. And again, we partied hard, particularly after exams, but it didn't take over my life. It's that slow, insidious onset that took years and years and years.
Yeah, almost
Even
like the
when
frog in the pot kind of a thing, where the frog doesn't notice that the temperature is being turned up. Maybe,
right.
If you stuck it in a boiling pot of water, it would jump, but it sounds like for you, it was slow and maybe kind of crept up on you.
Yeah, it definitely crept up on me. I mean, it was something that I did not even think about, other than when my kids started to get a little bit older. We would go to parties, my wife and I would drink too much and she would say something to me. And that became more frequent. And then once my oldest child and my middle child were off in college, it became worse and worse.
What do you think
I don't
happened
know.
there?
Part of it might have been just to fill the void, fill the time. I have a really hard time with this, Jason, trying to understand where I came from and how did I get there.
Yeah.
It's like, it's really difficult for me to pinpoint and say, this is what caused it. Because there was no triggering event that I can recall. It was just a slow, insidious march towards what I became. I recall probably the last 9 months before things really spiraled out of control. My son was a junior in high school. He was the only one that was home. My two other kids were off at college or out of college. And it was just a way to pass the time. And it went from the weekends and maybe a night here or there to every night, to the point of drinking on the weekends, like from sunup to sundown, to the point of I'm really hungover almost every day of the week now. I'm a pharmacist. Gee, I know how we treat alcoholics. We give them benzodiazepines, for example. And I would take one here or there to a couple nights a week. And then the pandemic hit and stress went through the roof. And that put everything on steroids. And then it was, let's have benzodiazepines, let's use narcotics. And when I say use, the number of narcotics I probably use, I would say it would be less than 10. But here's the funny thing. Narcotics make me incredibly ill to the point of throwing up, but it didn't matter. It was to get high. The benzos were so that I could wake up right-eyed, bushy-tailed, and be able to drink the night before. And it wasn't every single night, but it was slowly moving towards that, to when I finally got called into the security. Security actually pulled me aside. My supervisor came and said, "Hey, you need to go to a meeting." I walked into a room and there were 2 security people there, along with a couple other folks, a drug tester, and some other people that were online. And they just started asking me questions. You know, have you been taking alprazolam, or why, you know, talk to me about what your work day is like, which turned into, have you been taking alprazolam? And I freely admitted it right away. It's really weird. I still remember that day as if it was yesterday. It was July 10th, 2020. When I walked in there and they asked me for my key and my badge, and they started asking me questions. And at the end of it, they're like, "Well, you need to have a drug screen." And I'm like, "No problem." I'm in my mind, I'm like, this is not an issue, because I haven't taken an alprazolam in like 3 or 4 days. And, you know, I'm the smartest guy in the room, right? I'm the pharmacist. I should know that alprazolam it's in your body for like 21 days.
Yeah, you probably know the half-life, you know what it decomposes into during that.
Didn't care.
Explain that to me.
Didn't even think about it. Didn't even think about it.
Was it arrogance? Was it what? Why didn't you care?
I didn't care about that because I didn't think I was going to get caught. There was a lot of arrogance to it, and a lot of denial that this wasn't happening, that I would be fine, that this is just a misunderstanding. Absolute craziness.
Yeah, can you explain that to me? And the reason I ask is for myself and a few other people I know. There hasn't been denial. It was clear things were wrong. Our lives were a mess. For me, I never really launched into having a responsible adult job or finishing the education without getting the alcohol out of my life. So what's that like to have the responsible job, to have the family, and to be in denial, and, you know, be in this inner, to me, I'm thinking I'm in this meeting happens. My panic is like through the roof. I'm busted. It's over. I'm spiraling into a shame spiral, and you're feeling confident, or that it doesn't matter. Can you explain that a bit?
Yeah, I am. But at the same time, I'm just like you're just exactly explaining. I'm like, holy cripes, this is bad. This is really, really bad. And maybe it didn't really hit me until they sent me home, but they sent me home in a taxi. And I worked like 30 miles away, and they sent me home in a taxi, and I drove up to my driveway, and my son was going to work, and my wife had just gotten home, and I was home like an hour earlier than I should have been. And my son's like, "Why are you home?" And I was like, I'll talk to you later about it.
And they sent you home. They sent you home in a taxi for liability reasons. They were saying, we know this guy is probably under the influence of something, and we don't feel comfortable putting him in a car for our own liability's sake.
Correct.
And you're,
Right.
so it sounds almost like you were in shock too. Like maybe part of you is thinking, I'm going to get away with this. This is no big deal. They can't catch me. It's no big deal. And you're panicking. Maybe a bit of shock at that moment.
Yeah, there was a lot of that, because when I got home and my wife had just driven in the driveway and she asked me why I was there, I couldn't tell her the truth.
Mm.
I couldn't tell her the truth. Not the full truth, like half the truth.
Shame.
You know, oh yeah, a lot of shame. I knew at that point that things were really bad, really, really bad. I didn't really understand the consequences of it right away, but I knew that things were really bad. I tried to explain to her what had happened, but I didn't give her the full truth. And other than, but she knew I had a problem. Like she knew that there were issues. But she told me that I needed to go and speak to our pastor, like the next day. I need to back up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
When we got married, she was a Wells child, so to speak. Her parents were very much Wells.
Can you explain what that is for
Sure.
people that
For
might
all
not
of us
know
who
what
don't
that
know,
means? Yeah.
Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Synod. So a
That's
tight-knit,
basically the best denomination in the world.
absolutely. One of the strictest denominations there is of Lutheranism, really, when it gets down to it. And I, when we got married, or we were going to get married, and we started going through premarital counseling, she basically told me, I'm not going to change. You're a Catholic. And I, as a Catholic, I was like, what, because when I got out of high school and started going to college, I didn't go to church anymore. I was done with that. I started to date her and we got engaged. I became interested in Lutheranism from the standpoint of that I wanted to be a good husband, ultimately. And so I went through all the classes. I got confirmed. As we had children, I became involved in church, and I became an elder in church. I was an elder when my kids were fairly small, and because of time constraints, I asked to stop being an elder. And so I was really involved in church quite a bit. And then my alcoholism sort of took over my life. And so fast forward back to talking to my wife, she had said, you need to go talk to pastor. So I texted my pastor and we talked.
Well,
and
let me interrupt there, because I think that's
sure.
That's not everybody's first call. Can you explain a little bit why that was the first call?
I don't know. That was her call.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if she had an inkling that I wasn't telling the truth. I think maybe she had something that was part of it to push me in the right direction. It was a really sort of surreal those first couple days, because I went and talked to my pastor the next day, and he didn't say these exact words, but this is what he was talking about, which is, you need to confess what's going on, otherwise the guilt will kill you. Those weren't his words, those are my words. But he did say, you do understand that you're forgiven. That was really probably the first time, I would say, in my life that I took that seriously, because at that very moment, I didn't think that I could ever be forgiven for what I had done, because I pretty much that first night didn't sleep at all and thought about all the things that I had done and all the hurt that I was probably going to cause and all of the pain that I was going to cause. And I didn't know what my life was going to be within the next 12 hours.
Hmm.
I had no idea.
What was
Going
going
and
through your
talk-
head?
Divorce. It was dark, but it wasn't that dark. It was dark from the standpoint of what the heck have I done to myself? Why am I here? But it wasn't like I need to take myself out of this situation by killing myself. Like I didn't ever think. That's one thing that I can truthfully say I never once thought about. Because I think looking back at it, that's the chicken way. And that's really harsh to say that, because people who commit suicide have no hope. I've been there. I get that. I understand that no hope part, but I never thought that I should do that. I never really thought about those kinds of things. I thought about what I needed to get done. I really took that like bull by the horns. Like, what do I need to do?
Interesting, but it was a moment that maybe people would consider suicide. This is the stockbroker
This is the moment
that his whole identity was based upon his prowess in the stock market, and the crash comes and he's got nothing. And like your world kind of tumbled at this point. Your career's out of the picture. You're not sure if you're going to stay married. This is like, my identity is on the line here, and I don't know what the steps are forward from here.
Yeah, I mean, when I can't, like I said, when I talked to my pastor and I came home, that's when I really spilled the beans with her, and I told her everything, and she was very obviously upset, because she's like, yesterday you told me this, and now today you're telling me this. Which one is it? I vividly remember that conversation. I had my wife is a saint. She set some incredibly brave boundaries for herself that moment. She told me that she would be 100% behind me if I was truthful and if I got myself some help, but she would not allow relapses. She was not going to go through the ups and downs of one moment being sober and the next drunk. It was not going to happen. That was really, really good, because it set for me a path of, I need to get myself right. And I knew that she would be behind me if I would do that, but I needed to do that. I had no idea what that meant, though. Like, I didn't know, where do I go get help?
Right.
What do I do?
What does that mean?
I didn't know
get
any
help?
of that. Yeah, I didn't get any of that, and
I'm curious, did you have a few between when you got let go and you're talking to the pastor? I mean, did you cold turkey it at that point? Did you
automatically? Yeah, I never suffered from withdrawal, because I wasn't drinking during the day. I mean, I was drinking after I'd get out of work. I would grab something on the way home. I had a 30-minute drive. I would be drinking on the way home in the car. When I got home, I would start to drink. Needed to get a head start. But then I also knew I needed to get to work the next day. But I was constantly trying to move that bar. Like, if I could just drink a little bit more, just a little bit more. And then I was using here and there as well. And it was a tightrope that I was trying to walk, and just trying to get through each day.
what do you think it was about the alcohol that made it so important that you were like, I want to do this as much as I can? That's kind of
I
what it
don't know.
sounds like. I'm going to do this as much as I'm going to get a head start on the way home. You know, you maybe had a limit. I'm not going to drink at work, or I'm not going to drink during the day. But what was it about it that was like, I'm going to pack in as much as I can and push the envelope maybe a little bit?
At that point, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know how I moved across that continuum. I really don't. It wasn't like, it was just, I need to feel good.
Hmm.
I don't know what that meant though. I really don't. Like, it's very, like, I still try to think about this. Like, what was my motivation? I really don't know. I
Yeah.
don't. I honestly don't
It's
know.
not childhood trauma, right? It's not,
No,
you know, your horrible wife that was harping on you all the time and you needed to get a moment's rest, you know.
no, no, no. I mean, and she even said, and I won't forget this. She used a lot of past tense terms. Like, we had a good life.
Hmm.
We had a good life, and now you ruined it. A person at that point could say those are really hurtful words, but like I was telling you before, they were incredibly brave words to set healthy boundaries for her. I can look back and say that those were really good things that she did. She did them for herself, but they were really good for me because it set me on a path to be incredibly motivated. Because one of the things that I've learned in recovery is you have to be incredibly motivated at first to get the help that you need, that you're required to get your mind and your body back on a correct path. But I've also learned that motivation only lasts so long. It's, it's a set period of time. It's different for every person, but there's a set period of time where, you can only be motivated so much to get the help. But then what's after that? What gets you, what makes you kick after the motivation is gone? That was a good search, figuring that out.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, I was a pretty good student in high school. In college, I was a decent student. I was an okay student in pharmacy school. I mean, it was C's get degrees. It was hard. It was really hard. But whenever I tried to set out to do something, it was like, I'm going to get an A in this. I'm going to get an A++. And so that's how I attacked my recovery. I'm going to get an A+ in this sucker. I'm going to be the best. I'm going to be the best recovering alcoholic there ever was. But when you start going to meetings, you start looking around the room, you realize that there's a continuum of people there. Some people are desperate and looking for help. Some people have found the help and are just there and want to listen to those of us who are coming in who are struggling, because they want to be reminded of what it was like when they first got into recovery. I'm at that point now. I enjoy first step meetings. I enjoy people who are struggling, not because they're struggling and that I enjoy that they're struggling. I remember what it was like. It brings me back to that moment when I drove into the driveway and my son was leaving and my wife was just coming home. It reminds me of what that was and how cruddy and crappy my life was for the first 3 or 4 months to try to get myself back to where I needed to get back.
Was that the motivation part? Was that, and I'm curious too, by motivation, do you mean that there's this external motivation that's pushing you to get through the initial phase of getting clean, or explain a little bit more about what that means to you, the motivation versus
The
what
motivation,
happens after that.
the motivation was to get help, which, you know, I look back at it now, and there was God at every little itty bitty step. Like he put me in spots that at the time I had no idea, but they were like the absolute perfect spots. Like, for example, I got suspended on a Friday. On Monday, I got fired. Monday afternoon, I talked to an EAP counselor, employee assistance program counselor for my former employer, who was made available to me. And she said to me, "You need to go to an AA meeting." I had no idea what the heck an AA meeting was, other than I heard about it and what I seen in the movies. But I went to an AA meeting. We have a great Wisconsin pharmacy recovery network in the state of Wisconsin, and I got in touch with one of the head people, and he talked my ear off for an hour and a half, telling me it was going to be fine. I went to my first AA meeting that night, on that Monday night, and it's a meeting I chair now. It was during the pandemic, or coming right out of it. So it was one of the first meetings that they were holding in person again. That fell into place. I got into a intensive outpatient program in Green Bay that was a little bit different. It wasn't a 12-step program. Sort of their idea was, well, the 12-step programs are out there, so why would we duplicate that? They did a lot of dialectical behavior therapy to give you the tools to understand that things are going to be okay. Like, just stop.
Yeah.
Stop.
Yeah, that therapy, I think, helps people with their cognitions, right? If they kind of get too far into their head, and gives tools with that.
Yeah, there's, that intensive outpatient therapy was great, because I learned how to meditate. I learned how to do all of these different things to allow my mind to focus, allow my mind not to regurgitate the bad thoughts, look at the good things that are happening around me. Listen to the birds, listen to the rustling of the trees, the rain, the roof as it's cracking because the sun is shining on it. Things that you don't even remember anymore. It was really good stuff. They were things that I never thought about, but the therapy really helped, really, really helped. And then going to meetings really helped. And then getting hooked up with some Christian recovery really helped.
Part of that just noticing things in the present is a technique to help you not get caught up in your thoughts.
Yeah.
And that if my thoughts are going to lead me down this path towards drinking, or they're going to justify it in some way, or I'm going to make myself so miserable that drinking seems like the only solution to my misery, one antidote to that is just to notice things that aren't part of your thoughts, that are part of the natural world. How do things sound? Right. How do things feel? What can I see with my eyes right now? And it requires enough focus that you can't do that and do the spiral out of control thoughts at the same time. I think that's one of the things that's helpful about that whole DBT thing.
Yeah, the therapy itself was great, and then I ended up in aftercare. So I was in treatment for, what was it, 5 or 6 months. I was lucky because my wife is a pharmacist as well, and we had a really decent income, and so we didn't really have to necessarily worry about money, although money was tight because I had kids in college and, you know, things that needed to get done from a money standpoint. And but my wife was fantastic from that standpoint too. She just said you need to get well, to move forward, but you need tools. And so that therapy and the intensive outpatient and those things, those were all really good things. And I was really motivated to do them, really motivated. Like I said, I was going to get an A in that. And I did. I got an A. I was the best in class, in my opinion. But I really dove into it. I was meditating a couple times a day. I would read all the readings. I would go to AA meetings like 5 times, 6 times a week. I would do all of those things that I needed to do to get myself to move from being a struggling substance abuser to someone who could get their mind back in the right direction. But I wasn't working. And that was something that was weighing on my mind. And I finally took a entry-level job with an insurance company and I did some research and I was like, I need to do something. And eventually maybe I can get myself back into a pharmacist position with this insurance company and you still use my degree and help people. It was kind of an interesting way because it turned from how do I help myself to how do I help others, that continuum. But that's part of recovery. You learn, at least I learned that part where, to give it up. You got it. Now you need to give it up to help others. But how do you get there? That's that part, that's where that motivation part, where you lose that motivation. And now that I've been recovered for 2+ years and is still in recovery, that's where I am today. It's not motivation anymore. It's gratitude. It's feeling fantastic. It's my life can't be any better. Those kinds of things. And that's what drives me today. Drives me to this. Why would I ever give an interview to someone about how screwed up I am? It's to hopefully help others see that you can be screwed up too, but you can live an incredible life. You can get to where you can get what I have. You can do it. I don't know how you're going to do it, but you can. It can be there.
Yeah, when you say that, it makes me think about the role of meaning and purpose, and that maybe in the beginning you need that motivation to get through, but at a certain point it needs to become, you need to have enough meaning and purpose in your life that you enjoy what you're doing, and drugs and alcohol aren't part of that. And there's something that you wouldn't go back to because you've created this meaning and this purpose in your life that have nothing to do with that old set of behaviors.
It's one of the very first meetings, AA meetings I went to, there was a gentleman, I can't remember his name, but he said, I'm a grateful alcoholic. And I had been sober maybe 3 or 4 days. And I had a lot of choice words under my breath. How can you be grateful about this? This is terrible. This stinks. This is the worst thing ever. But you also know at that point, and I knew at that point that I couldn't go back to what I had been doing, but there's such a disconnect. You need to move forward, but yet you're trying to rely on what you did before. But what you learn is that what you did before is why you can't rely on it. You can't do that because that didn't get you anywhere. That got you to the point where something happened. You know, I'm incredibly grateful for the standpoint that I did a lot of really, really bad things, but I didn't have really a ton of consequences. You know, I didn't have drunk driving. I didn't end up in jail. I lost my livelihood, sure, that I had worked so hard to get, but I can get that back as long as I do the right things. I didn't kill anyone. I mean, I know people in AA that's happened to. I didn't spend time in jail. I didn't lose my family. My family has been unbelievably supportive to what has happened through no fault of their own, but really supportive to be there, to cheer me on. This is really emotional for me because that second day, that Saturday that I went and saw my pastor, and my son came home and he asked me some really difficult questions. And the first question he asked was, "Are you and mom going to make it?" And I didn't have an answer then. I told him I hope so, but I didn't know. And then he said, "Are you going to go to jail?" And I didn't know the answer to that either. You know, I stole prescription medication. By all rights, I should be in jail. I really should have been. I don't know if I'd be out at this point. He wanted his dad there. Whenever I have a tough day, I think about that day, to get that little extra bit of motivation if I need it. I usually don't, because I don't go down that spiral anymore. But that was hard. That was really hard. And he was, you know, again, you got to remember when this was. This is during the pandemic. This is when things are bad. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world. Uncertainty all of a sudden with your family. You had the one thing that was the rock as a child, as a 17-year-old going off to college, and that all of a sudden might be torn out from underneath you. That was bad. That was something, again, that I never ever want to have to go through to try to explain that. Great motivation though, really good motivation. Difficult conversation. I didn't have any answers. First time probably in my life that I didn't have any answers. But I didn't have any answers at that point. But it was good though. It was really good.
Like you've been disassembled.
Yeah.
You're starting over from zero at this point.
Yeah. I mean, those were the things that motivated me to get me into treatment, to get me to get right, to understand what it was, and to really work my recovery. And, then I started getting, you get into AA and you understand those kinds of things. And those are really great things. And I still go to AA meetings, two times a week, but this is where I start thinking about, well, okay, the motivation is gone. So then, like, how do you deal with it? Like, what what's your life now? What is it? You know, what can you do? And that's where, for me, really delving into Christian recovery has been really helpful, because you start to understand that gospel message, that you are worthy, that it's okay, your sin's no greater than anyone else's, that God has forgiven you, that Jesus has saved you, he has died for you, it's all over, there's nothing you need to do. You know, I look at you know, I've talked to you about 2 Corinthians, about, you know, the passage about, you know, Paul had a thorn in his hand or side or whatever, a thorn in his flesh. And 3 times he asked God to take it away. And God said, my grace is sufficient for you. When I heard that the first time, that hit me really hard. Everyone has problems, but it's what are you going to do about it, and what has someone else done for you that you can just move forward and it's just fine. You know, and that you can, at the end of that verse, that you can rejoice in your foibles. You can rejoice in the fact that you're not perfect. You can rejoice in the fact that others around you are not perfect, because your weakness has made God's strength perfect. It's a really powerful message for me, because when I was using, I was a perfect person. I did everything right. It's that unbelievable arrogance that you have when you're using and you have a position like I had of power is not the word, but it is, because you're controlling people's medications to a certain extent.
Status so at the very least, right?
Yeah. I mean, I sit and I think about those days, and how I actually think about how incredibly arrogant that was. People who came in who were trying to get their prescriptions early for their controlled substances, and how I would be higher than thou. Like, you can't get this early, you know, there's no way, you know, I could tell they were an abuser, and here I am, an addict myself. Unbelievable arrogance.
So how do you apply that in a situation in life now, this idea that you can rejoice in your weakness? How do you apply that? How does that?
Yeah, so I don't know the answers. I used to know all the answers, now I don't. A lot of times you learn in recovery is you just need to let things alone. Just let them go. And it's amazing how they all fall into place. When I was using it, was all about, I have to control this, I have to control that. I am in control. And look where that got me. Look where that got me too. Didn't get me anywhere. If you take the opposite tack,
the results of it are terrible.
The results were terrible, absolutely awful. I mean, life-breaking for a lot of people. I'm one of the few lucky ones. I guess maybe not lucky. I'm one of the few, and I wouldn't even say chosen. I'm one of the few people who understand that Jesus has done it for me. There's so many people that struggle with that. I see that all the time in AA, in particular, where people are having a lot of difficult times, and you get to that question, like the third step about giving it up and understanding that there's a power greater than you. And in my case, it's God. And I always talk about Jesus and talk about God. And I don't care about other people who get really uncomfortable in their seats about that fact, because I know the truth, which is God has taken care of it for me. And I'm living proof of it. and that they're so afraid of having a conversation and a relationship with their Savior. They're just so afraid of it because they have been taught that they're going to hell. There's no way out of it. There's no way. They've been taught they have to do something, but they don't. That's the gospel message. They don't have to do anything. And you say, well, then, I mean, come on, Darrin, that means they just have a blank credit card. It's like, no, I want to show people that they can have what I can have, that you can have that forgiveness. It's not a blank check.
Yeah. Why is it not a
No.
blank check to just do whatever you want? Why is that?
It's just faith. It's fruits of faith. You see what Jesus did for you. Now you got to take it to others. You don't get, there still is the law. There's a reason it's called law and gospel. There still is the law. You can still have trouble if you're not willing to follow some of the basic truths. But what you do understand, and so everyone says, well, you're speaking out of both sides of your mouth. You know that there's a law, but then you say at the same time, there's the law, but then you say, well, you don't have to worry about it. Yeah, well, sure. Yeah, I guess. I mean, you can make that argument, and you can make that argument because you are a fallible human being. You're not perfect like Jesus. You're not perfect like God. It's okay to understand that you're not perfect. It's okay that you understand that you will break the law. It's okay that you sin. That doesn't give you a blank check because you don't want to be, well, I can do whatever I want. No, I tried that. That didn't work. That didn't work so good. It's better to be on the straight and narrow as much as you can, understanding that you're still going to screw up. But because Jesus died for you, you're going to go to heaven. It's okay. But people who in AA in particular who struggle with that, really struggle with that. They can't have a relationship with God because they're afraid of him. But he's there to help you. It's hard to explain maybe until you go through something like I've done to really, let it just be and watch everything fall into place for you. Despite the fact you really are doing nothing.
When you stop trying to control it, when you stop trying to manipulate things and have all the answers, when you stop doing that, then you can experience peace.
Yeah. That's where we talked about it before. When that motivation ends, you got to find that peace, that serenity, that solace, that you don't have to micromanage your life, that you don't have to micromanage everything. Because when you did that, it was terrible. When you let it go and you be genuine, you tell the truth, you love one another, you forgive people. The moment you screw up, you ask for forgiveness. Those are all things, if you do those things, you will get this incredible peace that I feel now. I didn't feel when I was drinking, I didn't feel my early sobriety, but I feel that now.
It makes me think of the passage where Jesus says, to inherit the kingdom of heaven, you must become like a little child. That in a sense, you were being this adult, controlling everything, having all the answers, smartest guy in the room. And then when you give that up and you become a little child and you're just dependent upon God, there's peace.
Yeah. You have to get to that surrender point, right? I mean, the surrender of it all. And have that that childlike curiosity. That's one thing like that I really learned in recovery, in particular through dialectical behavioral therapy, was that just notice things, look at it. How interesting is that? How curious? Wonder why that's happening, as opposed to, oh my word, I can't even believe that's happening. How do I fix it? What do I need to do to get that done? I have to wait. No, you can't do that. You can't help me. I need to take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
That whole prospect.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't work.
Yeah. Having to judge it and control it and be in charge.
Yeah. I mean, I sit back and look back over the last 2+ years and say to myself, I don't know how I got to the point I got to, but I know that there's only one guiding factor, and that's Christ. That's how I got to where I got to. And he put everything in front of me. I just need to let him do the work. Just let it happen.
Yeah. What does that
Hard
mean?
thing to do.
Yeah. What does that mean to let him do the work?
To not force things. I mean, let's just kind of revisit what I've been through in the last couple of years, just like work wise, right? So I took an entry level position into an insurance company, and after a year, I decided I'm like, I should try to move up. I should try to do something more with my degree, and so I interviewed for a position that I thought would be like a stepping stone. And I interviewed with a gentleman, and he just said to me, he goes, you won't like this job. You just won't. This is not the right fit for you. I could have sat there and argued with him, but he's then said in the next breath, I think I have something for you. And so I interviewed for that, and I got that job. And now that I have that job, I'm working as a client-facing account executive, and that's a stepping stone to being what I can do with my degree, which is a consultant pharmacist. But in the meantime, everything that has happened to me at work, there have been so many problems, so many issues, and it's kind of funny because everyone on my team knows of my past because I'm very open about it. And they're all like, you find like every little problem. And it's like, I'm not really looking for them. They kind of find me. But I know that they've been put in front of me for a reason. And that's to help with it and to potentially fix the problem. But I'm constantly being tested, but it doesn't bother me because I know that ultimately all of these things that are happening to me are good things so that I can help and learn and move on to the next phase of whatever that is.
I think that's a huge shift. For many people, when difficulties and problems and things go wrong at work come up, it feels like punishment, and it feels like something that I've got to avoid or control or whatever. And you've seen it as these are things that are helping me grow. A loving father has put these things in my path for my benefit. That's huge. That's not the way most people look at problems at work.
No, don't get me wrong. They're not like easy, like, oh, this is going to be a cakewalk. I mean, there have been some sleepless nights about some of these things, but I know ultimately all these things that have happened, they're good for me because the only way to grow is to be stretched, is to feel that uncomfortableness. And going through recovery, that's what recovery is every single day, is uncomfortableness. Because you are in an uncomfortable skin that you haven't been in a very long time. I sit back and I think about those first few months, about sitting in my bedroom and just crying, and not really knowing why I was crying, but just crying because it was just emotion. It was this raw emotion that I had suppressed for years through alcohol use, and later for a short period of time of using prescription medication to try to allow myself to not have the alcohol be a problem. I mean, you just sit back and think about that insanity of that, and I don't know how I got to that point. I still don't know how I got there. I don't know how that works, other than in someone who is addicted to substances that doesn't understand realities of what's really happening. It's the only way I can explain it. You're so caught up in your substance abuse. It's not, people say, well, it's like, damn the torpedoes or damn the consequences. Yeah, to a certain extent. It's also this subconsciousness that your life is just going a certain way, and then there's this what you're doing sort of thing, and there's neither. What you're trying to do is not really rooted in reality when you step back and look at it from a real far distance and look at it with a clear mind and eye. At the time, it makes perfect sense.
Like there's a delusion almost.
There is a delusion. There's a delusion that you think that you can use your way out of it, if that makes any sense.
Drink my
That
way
if I
out
just
of it,
do,
use my way out of it.
Yeah, I'll take care of that tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll be better. That lasts like an hour in the morning. Oh yeah, but now I can start drinking again. That's the whole mindset. One of my friends, I can't remember if it's in Christian Recovery or AA or where it was, but it's this: the devil is right here. It's on your shoulder. He's doing push-ups, jumping jacks. He's running marathons. He has patience like you've never seen before. He is ready at any moment to put doubt back into your mind.
Yeah, he's waiting to devour.
And he's there. He's there every single moment. And you need protection from that. Yeah, that's the peace now that I have. It's like, yeah, he's there. I know it. But there's a greater power that can keep that at bay. And that's what I look at now. So
So what is there's a lot there. It's making me think of that verse. Not only so, but we glory in our suffering. Our suffering produces perseverance, and perseverance character, and character hope. That in addiction, we're just trying to get out of, you're trying to escape all the time, in one sense. Just use, drink, don't feel those feelings, manage it somehow, and to get to the point where you can see the troubles at work, even the ones that keep you up at night. You've got this faith that God's in control, and I can work through these things. And drinking and using gave me such bad results that I'm gonna let him be God.
yeah, it's that hope. It's the hope. Hope is an incredible, powerful feeling, and something that we need to, as recovering addicts of whatever it is, whatever flavor, is to show that hope. On my first anniversary of recovery, I was walking in my neighborhood with my wife, and I was so emotional. I was so angry. I was so angry from the standpoint of that, of all the hurt that I had caused for a year. I was angry at myself in particular. And I went to a meeting that night, and one of the old timers said to me, and I brought that up, that I was so angry. And he really shoved me aside with his words and said, there's nothing for you to be angry about. You need to talk about the hope that you have. You've gotten through a year, and there is hope. There's hope for others that are in this room. There's hope that you can exude and tell others about, that it can happen, that you can do it. Because people who are in active addiction have no hope, and they're searching for it desperately.
Yeah, it's one of the most hopeless places you can be.
It is. It really is. It's a terrible place. It really is. I talk about how dark that is, and it's really dark. Like, it's, one of the tenets of AA is that you need to be incredibly and judiciously and rigorously honest with yourself. And any kind of recovery, you have to be that way. You have to be rigorously honest. What makes you tick? What are the things that you have done that were bad? What are the things that you're going to do to maybe right that ship, maybe mend that fence? What are the things that you're going to do moving forward to allow others to see that? Not just yourself, but how do others, or what can others learn from your past problems that you've learned, and to share that knowledge that you can recover. People that are in recovery are miracles. There's no reason why a lot of people in recovery should really be in recovery. There really isn't.
I'm so glad you said that, because there's so many people that think they've got it nailed. Oh, it's childhood trauma. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that. And I keep looking at it and like, I have no idea. Why did that guy get sober on his third attempt? I don't know. Why did that one get sober on his first attempt? I can't tell you. There is no one really understands this. And it is, if somebody's getting sober, it's a miracle. There's no formula complex enough to predict what's going to happen. It should still be shocking to people when they see someone get sober.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the statistics of it all, what do they say? Like, it's like 20 some percent, or I don't even know if it's that high, actually will recover and be sober. And then even those people have like a 50 or 60 or 70% chance of relapsing. I mean, the numbers are way against you particularly for a person like myself. I quit and I've never had a drink again. Never used again. There aren't many like us that have done that. And I'm only 2+ years. I got a lot of years to go yet. And so it's that daily reprieve every single day. I'm a sinner today. Jesus' grace is upon me. I need to take full advantage of this day. to understand that I know that his grace is for me and that I'm forgiven, and I need to let others know that. One of the things I talk about is the fact that the bus is really big. We need to get as many people on that bus to heaven as possible, but we got to tell people about how great that bus is. I mean, it's got air conditioning, all the snacks you want, streaming TV, whatever it is. But we want to get you on that bus. If we can get you on that bus, it'll be good.
Hmm. Yeah.
But
and it has the best thing in the world, which when you understand it, it has Jesus. And when you really understand what that is, what he is, and what he's like, you want to be around that. That's
oh
what
yeah,
you want. That's what I want.
yeah. And you come to this realization too, at least for me, I've come to this realization that, the old hymn that I'm but a stranger here, heaven is my home. Uh, people are really uncomfortable with the thought of death. I mean, in our society in particular, people are really uncomfortable with that. What can I do? I have to do something here to make my world better. Yeah, you can try, but there's a plan for you. You need to allow that plan to happen. But Jesus never said that this world would be easy, and he's right. It's not easy. But heaven is going to be great, and that's something I look forward to.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not comfortable here, that's for sure. That's okay though, to be uncomfortable. It really is. That's one of the biggest things, like I think I've said before, in recovery, is the fact that I am uncomfortable in my own skin now. That uncomfortableness. I'm uncomfortable. I'm comfortable with my uncomfortableness. It's okay to be that way. It's okay to be not at peace, understanding that you have peace. It's such a bizarre sort of concept, but that's what it is.
But I think it makes sense in light of eternity. Like if all you've got is this life, and this life sucks, that's an unsolvable, unmanageable, unbearable problem, right? If this isn't it, and you've got a caring, loving father who has arranged everything for you and is on your side, you can be uncomfortable. The goal of life isn't to remove discomfort and be blissfully happy every moment. Sometimes so you can do something that's hard. You can do something you don't like. You can do something that scares you. And those are things that I think, especially when you're in active addiction, you don't want to hear.
No, and when you're in active addiction, you believe that you can control it and that you can find the bliss through the substance that you're using. It's that chase, that ever chase of the best high. It's the ever chase of, if I just use a little bit more, or if I just do something different, or like they talk in Alcoholics Anonymous, if I just change it to whiskey, or just do beer, or just do wine, or try to control my drinking. I mean, the excuses are, to infinity. You can try all these different things, but if you are truly addicted to something, and I don't care what it is, if it's pornography, if it's gambling, if it's food, if it's anxiety, whatever it is, if you think you can control it by using substances, you are sadly mistaken.
Yeah.
But people believe that they can do that. And people in active addiction, I was there. I thought that I could do it. I really did.
Yeah. I've got the means to something. And if I do it the right way, it solves the problems, or it gets me where I want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just so different than we're just receiving from our Father above.
It's such a crazy thought process. I can't explain it. I've tried to figure it out in my head. I just don't know what it is. I think back. It's kind of funny because I think back about like what got me here sometimes, and I always say sort of the same thing. I should not be here. There's no reason for me to be where I am at today. I am way too smart. I'm a pharmacist. I learned about all of these things in school. I learned about alcohol. I learned about drugs. I learned about pharmacology. I learned how dangerous they were. I know how dangerous they are. I know what should and shouldn't be done. And yet I threw all of that to the wind in active addiction because I thought I could control it. And what you soon realize in active addiction, when you finally get to that point, is you are sadly mistaken.
I think that control is really key. I've went back and forth with my sister on this, that these, there's these programs that are based on, if you give kids education about drugs, then they won't use them. If you just share with them what drugs are really about and the dangers and et cetera, it's how they work in the body and blah, 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 then they won't use. And I noticed even in high school, me and all the other kids that were doing things pharmacologically that we shouldn't have been doing, were the ones that read those pamphlets. And we were looking for information in them. Oh, at what point? Oh, okay, this guy, he went out of control there. So I just need to not do that.
Right.
Like
it's never going to happen to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll quit before it gets to that point, but I'm going to keep doing it until that point. And I think you can be a pharmacist and you can know all of the effects that it has on the body. But if you still feel like, well, I can control this and I can use this information to control it, it's not actually a deterrent to using. And my wife, on the other hand, is somebody who's like the least addictive person I've ever met in my life, is not addicted to anything. She just doesn't care. She has no interest in knowing about drugs, no interest in learning about what they do. She just has no interest in it. Whereas me and my friends had a lot of interest in it, and we wanted to learn about it. We wanted to read The Doors of Perception, and we wanted to see what it does to your body. And we wanted, we developed our own sub theories about how we could use it in safe ways and blah, blah, blah. It wasn't information. It's not, the difference wasn't information and not information. It was, do I think I can use this and control it?
Yeah, and there's something else, I guess, for me. One thing that you learn, and I've given a talk to my alma mater, to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, to the School of Pharmacy students. One thing that I really learned through my entire addictive behaviors and recovery to this point is the fact that you learn about all of these things and you know all about all these things, and every single day you're immersed in these medications. And those of us who have addictive problems lost any kind of respect we had for substances. We lost all respect for it.
What does that mean?
Medications, there's a reason that a medication is prescription. It's because it's dangerous. If it's not used properly, it's dangerous. Controlled substances are incredibly dangerous because not only do they have physical addictive properties, they also have, more importantly, psychological addictive properties, depending upon what controlled level they are, schedule 5, 4, 3, 2, or medications that you can't even get, which are schedule 1s. As you move up that scale, the physical addiction is there, but more importantly, the psychological addiction is there. And that's where you lose the respect. You understand that the psychological is way, way more difficult to deal with than the physical. But if you become addicted to those things, as a pharmacist, understanding that, a lot of it has to do with the fact that you've lost that understanding, you've lost that respect for what those medications can do because you think you know better.
Yeah, I think that's key. I see that right now with there's kind of a upward trend in hallucinogens of various kinds. And people, yeah, they really feel like they understand the proper use of it.
Right. You look around this world and you see politicians who are pushing the fact that, well, we can use marijuana, for example. And you can have a debate all you want all day long about marijuana becoming legal and alcohol, being legal and has been legal. Or we could go down the road of doing more with some of these substances because we know better. We know that they're going to be okay if they're used properly. But I know that alcohol, for example, is not used properly by the majority of Americans. They don't use it appropriately and properly. It's a complete, alcohol should be a controlled substance. It ought to be. It has so many destructive aspects of it. If we really wanted to go down that road, I know that if we introduce marijuana, and we have in certain states, you just look at those states and you see what's going on and what's happening. And it's predicted, but the politicians think they know better. Well, as long as it's used properly, we'll just look around. It's not being used properly.
What do you see happening?
Colorado, for example, the number of people that are involved in DUIs under marijuana, the amount of homelessness that has increased dramatically because people have the ability to get these substances now and they use them and their lives go south. A lot of people, because you couldn't get a hold of them, they were protected from that. Now they're not. I'm not saying that we need to protect every single person from everything because we can't. But going down this road is not the proper way, in my opinion. I could be completely wrong, but I just know what it did to me. It wasn't good.
Yeah, I think sometimes the argument is that, well, because we can't control it, therefore we shouldn't. But yeah, there's studies too where they remove the liquor store from the neighborhood, and the neighborhood, things change in like a 3-block radius for the better, just because that liquor store is not there. Access has access to the substance is a risk factor, and you can trace the drug trade through the country on a map, and you can see what happens to those neighborhoods that the drug is traveling through to get to its destination, because access to it matters. So I don't think making everything free and legal is the answer, because just increasing the access, you are statistically a few more people are going to get addicted to this stuff because they have access to it.
They have access to it. And I mean, there's so many people that have underlying addictive behavior. They just don't know it. I mean, I didn't think I'd be an addict, and yet here I am.
Yeah, as I look at the risk factors, I'm not seeing a whole lot, No. And yet
for me, there was. I mean, what are my risk factors?
Yeah, I'm not hearing a family tree that lights up for addiction. I'm not hearing childhood trauma. I'm not hearing growing up in a disadvantaged neighborhood. The one thing that you did mention was community standards about regarding alcohol were pretty lenient.
Yeah.
But your job wasn't, So
Right.
yeah, I'm not
I
hearing a
mean,
whole lot of risk factors.
the probably the risk factors that I haven't talked about is, I mean, like I said, my dad was probably a heavy drinker. There were people in his family that were heavy drinkers. Again, for me to label them as alcoholics, I don't know. In my mother's side of the family, there were suicides. There was one of my uncles was addicted to substances. There's psychological issues, and so maybe I do have an underlying or underpinning past, but I didn't have any of the risk factors to promote those things per se. And most of the people, at least that I know of, there's a lot of people that have drinking in their family, but a lot of people, it's this slow, insidious crawl towards where it ends up for whatever reason. There's a lot of people that haven't had tremendous trauma in their life that are addicted to whatever. There's a lot of people that have grown up in incredibly great households that still have addiction problems. There's a lot of people who have grown up in unbelievably abusive relationships and households that don't have any addiction problems.
Yeah, that's why the one factor analysis, it always just frustrates me. Like, it's family connection. As long as you have people who have family connection or don't, that's what determines alcoholism. I'm like, well, that's a factor. It's a risk factor. Is it a one variable model of addiction? I don't think so.
No, when you look at disease states of any kind, there's risk factors that are involved, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get them. I mean, how many people are walking down the street that are overweight, that are smoking, that have a family history of cholesterol problems, and you look at their lab results and it doesn't even appear that they have any problems. And then you have people who have those same family traits that are slender, that are thin, that don't smoke, whatever, end up with cancer, end up with a heart attack or diabetes. I mean, how does that, it's
when there's
just what happens.
What's true on the population level, you can't move that level of analysis and predict for any one person.
Right.
On a population level, there are risk factors, and you can see what happens in a population, but you can't necessarily predict any single person. There's outliers all over the place, and in both directions.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit, and we'll close out here in a minute, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about AA versus recovery versus church, and maybe not even versus, but you're someone who's got a foot planted in all three of those areas. You attend AA, you chair an AA meeting, you attend Resilient, you attend church. How do those things fit together and not fit together? And
sure. So one of the first things, we talked about already is the fact that I wanted to get an A in my recovery. And so I took it.
And there's two in AA.
Right. I took it in, and I think personally, for me, at least it worked. And I think that others should really look at this, is I took an all of the above approach. I took I need counseling. I need to go to AA. I found Christian recovery. I need to get better and make sure I'm doing church as much as I can and be involved as much as I can. But I need all of these things because I am a fallible human being, and I need to shore up every single fiber that I can. And so the difference for me between the three different things is AA is a great place for people to get sober, get sober. There is a spiritual component of AA that people struggle with. If they can find that spiritual component, they will most likely be successful. For me, that spiritual component comes through God and through Jesus, and me talking about those things in AA to others who are struggling to find it, that you can find that. Resilient is a group of people who struggle, but who believe and have that spiritual component and are searching more for that spiritual component to help them continue on and understand that the 12-step programs are important, but the spiritual part of it is the most important. And church just helps and is the cornerstone for the spiritual component of all of the programs. And so for me, or at least for what I see, those people who are involved in church and have issues can become involved in Resilient and help with those issues, whatever it can be, whatever, anxiety, for example, understanding that, hey, there's others like you that are struggling with something, but the cornerstone of it is God, but you need to have God in your life. And so that's where church is, and church is most important. So for me, it's church and then Resilient and then AA. And there's a continuum, but the church is where the spirituality starts and ends. Resilient helps foster that spirituality for others who are looking for it and who are struggling, not understanding, at least in my mind, not understanding that spirituality can really help you with your problem. You just have to kind of get there, connect it a little bit. And AA, most of those folks are struggling with some sort of spirituality. If they can get that component, they will be much improved in their struggle. They're church is church. Church is about Christ, you're saved. Resilient is about Christ, you're saved. This is the message. You need to hear it a little bit more. If you hear it a little bit more, you see others who are having problems and understand it can work. By having that spiritual component, you'll be helped. You will be helped a lot. AA is for a lot of unchurched people who really don't understand what spirituality is, who don't understand what Jesus is and what God can do for you. My charge, so to speak, is to help those people try to find that a little bit. So I witness a lot. Like I'm able to, because I have my roots in church and understand that, and I can talk about that in Resilient, but I can really witness that in AA and tell people about how it's really helped me, because it has helped. Everyone gives when I started to go to AA, my pastor's like, he goes, I just want you to be careful because their idea of a higher power is kind of weird. And after like my first meeting, I'm like, okay, this is a little bizarre as a Christian, and as a Wells Christian, this is a little weird, but they're just a little misguided. Just need a little help. And I'm going to try to promote what I know and help with that. But I love going to AA meetings because you hear people who, again, are just struggling with that whole concept of a higher power. They talk about, a God of your own understanding. I know God has saved me, but I have no idea how he works. I don't know. Really don't. It's
Like,
that
that's
faith
great.
part.
I love that. The God of your own
It's that
understanding versus a God I can't understand.
yeah, I
His,
can't get,
his
I don't
ways are
get it.
his ways are so far above me. I don't get them.
Yeah, I don't get them. It's way above my pay grade,
Hmm.
but I'm okay with that. That's the problem. A lot of people, got to know how this works. Sometimes you don't need to.
Hmm.
It's probably best you don't. Just sit back and watch.
I like that. Is there anything that you wanted to say, an important point that you wanted to make, a story or an anecdote or something that you wanted to share with people that we didn't get to?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is there is hope out there. You can be helped. When you're in active addiction, you are hopeless. You are searching desperately for hope. You have no idea how to find it. But you can find it, and you can find peace, and you can be good about it, and it can really be fantastic. My life, for example, has never been better than it ever has been over the last 2+ years. Just hasn't been. It's not, I didn't do a lot. People look at me and say, you did all this stuff. You did intensive outpatient, you did aftercare, you do all these types of things, you go to meetings. It's like, yeah, I used to drink during all those hours that I do this now. It's not like I'm changing much other than my focus. But I didn't do a lot of things here. I really didn't. That I let things happen finally. And I let God take care of it. And it's such a joy, and I have so much peace from it now, because I understand how he works. I understand, but I don't get it, because like we just talked about, it's way like your mind can't wrap around it. You just can't. But it's okay to have that. But you can get hope. You can find peace.
Yeah, I'm seeing what you're describing. Kind of, you've got this control versus letting it happen and just trusting in God, and then also the hopelessness of addiction versus the hope that one has in Christianity, as kind of the two the two sides of the coin. There's the addiction side, and then there's the recovery side. And it sounds like those two things, releasing the control and gaining hope, were at least two very important parts of your recovery.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, that gives me
Yeah.
some ideas too about what to do with that lesson that you suggested too. I think it'd be a nice addition to the Rest in Jesus portion of the book, is to look at the insanity of that attempt to know and control what's happening versus being okay with God being in control, and being okay with not understanding, okay with
And
discomfort.
and understanding that his grace is sufficient, understanding that you are weak, but because of your weakness, his strength is perfect. And it is. We are desperate human beings looking for something, and he is there to help.
Yeah. I think that understanding that grace is sufficient. I don't think it doesn't seem sufficient when you're addicted.
it doesn't seem sufficient when you're not addicted. At least in my mind, like allowing God, like his grace is so overwhelming and so incredible. Again, you can't reconcile it in your brain. Like, you know that you are a hopeless human being. You deserve nothing but hell for what you are. But yet, because he died for all of your sins, he sees you as white as snow. It's that concept is very difficult for people to get, to really understand. But it's so peaceful, man. It's so peaceful.
We
And you kind of get it.
This week used the same lesson when I went out to all the rehabs, and there's a statement, we read, he who knew no sin became sin so that we might become the righteousness of God. So what difference does it make that God sees you as righteous? And it just hit in every, people who understood that, their faces would light up and they would talk about the freedom that it gave them. The people who were still struggling with it, you could see where it's, I don't know if he sees me as righteous. Like, well, we just read a verse that said he does.
He does.
I don't know if when I die, I don't know if it went right to the heart of it. You could just see, it's almost like a barometer of where different people were at with it, but the people who understood that, were very happy people.
Yeah.
Content. Yeah. It is, but it's hard. It's hard to understand. I guess without faith, right? It's one of those things that without God giving us that faith, we can't understand it. We're still stuck just with the law side of things.
Yeah, it's that Holy Spirit part. He doesn't get enough credit, that Holy Spirit dude.
Right? Yeah. Really, you could preach till the cows come home. Holy Spirit is one that grants the faith.
Yep.
And
yeah,
we don't control that. He does what he's going to do.
Yeah, that's part of, like, you see a lot of people who struggle with the fact, well, why would this child get cancer and die? Why would this person get this affliction and be fine? Why would this person get struck by a vehicle and die? Why would someone be in an accident from a drunk driver? These are the struggles that people have every day that are hard. They're very hard to deal with, and understandably so. But if you can get to that point of, that's all part of the plan, that's just part of what it is. But that's that, it's that uncomfortableness we talked about, because that's an uncomfortable thought, because you as a human being, you want to control a lot of things, but you just don't have it. You can't control it. Yep. It's hard to give that up. It really is.
Yeah, but like you said, it's the evidence of where it leads you that I think may be a very good convincer that my controlling things is not a good idea.
Yeah, it's not a good idea.
His ways are better.
His ways are way better. Yeah.
Man, well, thank you for this conversation.
Sure.
Yeah, I hope we got to parts of the story that you wanted to share as well. It wasn't just my curiosity running the direction of the narrative, but it gave me a lot to think about.
Yeah, the biggest, I guess for me, the biggest take homes for me were the fact that that God could really grant me that peace and that serenity, and that my life was a miserable wreck. I didn't think it was. I sure didn't lead it on that it was, but it was. That there's a lot of tenets in AA that I still cling to, and one of them is that we're willing to revisit the past, but never, to understand our past and never shut the door on it, but not make it drive us. This whole the whole idea that you can ask others for forgiveness and you can ask others for the amends part of it, asking for it, but then you have to let that go. Like, you don't get to control what others think or feel about that. And that's that whole, you aren't going to shut the door on the past, but you are going to make amends. You are going to ask for forgiveness, but you have to be okay with that other people might not be okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
But you've done your part, and
Yep.
so let it be.
Yeah.
That's hard for us control addict freaks.
Yeah. But I think it's, again, that's where Christianity is. His plan is so good, because I think we're better able to accept whatever their answer is, knowing that we are the righteousness of God, and he has forgiven us. So whether they do or not, ultimately, I know I'm secure. And so I'm going to be as honest as I can in this, owning up to what I've done. And if you don't forgive me, I can live with it.
Yeah, because I think at the end of the day, Jason, as a Christian, you have to understand that your sin and other sin, there's nothing that's greater. We all sin. Sin is sin. It can be, you can't make your sin bigger than someone else's sin, or their sin isn't bigger than your sin. And so since they're all equal, you can let loose. You can let it loose.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to worry about, well, I did this or I did that. It doesn't matter. It's all sin is sin is sin. That's hard for people to wrap their head around, that part.
The ultimate equality, right? In God's eyes,
right?
We're all sinners, and we can all be saints.
Yes,
through faith.
Absolutely.
Amen.
Yeah,
well, thank you for your time. I really appreciate this.
Sure. Sure.
I'll probably start cutting out little pieces of it and showing that. Any concerns in terms of confidentiality or what to share or not to share?
No, I don't think so. I talked to my wife about it in particular. I think she originally was a little hesitant about it, but she understood that if this can help others, it can help others.
Okay.
Like I said, the biggest thing for me was the fact that the things that she did initially were protective for her, but they were like really incredibly, when I sit back and look at it, and she probably doesn't even, this is the God thing, right? She probably didn't even know that that's what she did, but it was him working through her that she set those things that were exactly perfect for me and perfect for our situation.
Yeah, God's the hero of our stories, but it sounds like she was a very faithful servant, and she did what he wanted her to, and it was helpful for her and for you.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, man, praise God for our wives, right?
Yes, amen. Yeah, without them, I don't know.
Yep, absolutely. All right, well, I'll let you go. I've taken too much of your time, but this is a great conversation.
Thanks,
I really appreciate it.
Sure. Anything to be, if you need any kind of follow up or anything like that, let me know. But
okay.
Yeah, more than happy to help.
All right, I appreciate it.
I got Jesus in my mind, and this world I live behind. Thought I'm on